This story is from Reddit user Relative Obscurity. Things are disappearing from my house, and I'm terrified by who might be taking them. The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. I had left my house for work in the morning, just as I always did, and when I got home that night, my yucca plant was gone. The second time it happened, I honestly assumed it was my wife. Again, I had left my house for work in the morning, and when I got home that night, my umbrella was gone. But then I remembered that my wife had left the house earlier than me that day and got home after me. In addition to the fact that it wasn't even supposed to rain. The third time it happened, well, is when I started to get suspicious of the bizarre disappearances and began to wonder whether something else was going on inside my home. Yet again, I had left my house for work in the morning, and when I got home that night, lo and behold, my record player was gone. In all three instances, no matter where I looked for the lost items around the house, no matter how hard I tried to find them, they were nowhere to be found. This continued happening enough times that I eventually decided to keep a log, to track everything that was disappearing. And so, I vowed that after a month of logging the missing possessions, I would scour the list for some sort of common denominator, some sort of motivation for why this was happening. But just a day before the end of the month, I left my house for work in the morning, and when I got home that night, the log itself was gone. That's when I realized that anything I wanted to keep, I'd better take with me when I left my house for work in the morning, lest it be swept away to wherever all of the missing things had been swept away to. So, that's exactly what I did, creating an itemized list of only the things I couldn't live without, by auditing every material object that I owned. And, in the process, I was incredibly surprised by both the amount of stuff that I'd accumulated over the years and the relatively small amount of stuff that I really needed. Once the list was complete, I would run through the same meticulous routine every morning, placing the most cherished of my personal belongings into a combination of my pockets and a backpack that I had bought for this very purpose. But one day I left my house for work in the morning and forgot the backpack, and when I got home that night, it, too, was gone. After this had gone on for about 2 months, so many household items had disappeared that my wife had assumed that I had been decluttering the home, purging it of my unwanted things. This was, of course, not the case, but I was too afraid to tell her the truth, too afraid that she'd think it was all preposterous. So I just played along. However, I was so disappointed with myself for lying to my wife, and at the same time, so frustrated with the disappearing items, that I swore to put an end to the situation once and for all. So I ordered a surveillance camera, and as soon as it arrived, I installed it, before leaving my house for work in the morning. But when I got home that night, sure enough, the camera was gone. That's when I realized that whoever or whatever was taking my things was aware that I was aware of it, and was actively thwarting my attempts to thwart it. But that only made me want to thwart it even more. The next week I faked being sick, calling out from work each day, for the sole purpose of coming up with a plan for how to stop the mysterious disappearances, or find out who, or what, was behind them, or both. That's when I had the realization that nothing seemed to disappear when my wife left the house, and only when I did. Since I'd been married to her for 8 years, and was fairly certain she wasn't the one hiding my things, I grew confident that there was someone or something else in the house who was specifically taking my things whenever I left. So, I reached out to my company's HR contact, requesting to work remotely, and less than a month later, the request got approved and I started working from home. Sure enough, a month went by and nothing was stolen, which led me to wonder whether it had actually been my wife's doing after all. Rationalizing that even though she did tend to leave the house before me and get back after me every day, she could easily come home during her lunch break. It took me a week to gather the courage to confront her about it, and I finally accused my wife of 8 years and trusted confidant of something completely outlandish. And just as I had feared, she thought it was all preposterous. And, As to be expected, she could not have been more offended. We had the worst fight of our marriage that night and both went to bed upset. And so, the next day, I decided to sacrifice a physical possession in order to make it up to Sarah, leaving my house for work in the morning, with the sole purpose of buying her flowers. But when I got home that night, gift in hand and ready to apologize this time, Sarah herself was gone. I should have known that she too had been taken away, but I was so obsessed with understanding the situation that I convinced myself that Sarah, still angry at me from the night before, must have up and left, and with Sarah gone, I could finally know for sure whether she was the one behind everything. Once again, I left my house for work in the morning, and when I got home that night, the flowers that I had bought for Sarah the day before were gone, and she had still not returned. But rather than accept the truth, I remembered that she still had the keys to the house. So, the next day, I hired a locksmith to change every lock in the home before leaving my house for work in the morning. But when I got home that night, my coffee table was gone. And that's when I knew, for certain, that Sarah wasn't the one behind the strange disappearances. That's when I knew that she was actually the victim of them, and that something else was undoubtedly in the house. My wife now missing, I cried myself to sleep hard that night, clenching at the very sheets that she once slept upon beside me. The next morning I thought about calling the police, but I knew that the tale would sound so far-fetched that they'd never believe me. My sadness quickly turned to rage, and I proceeded to tear my home apart, searching under every bed, inside every closet, behind every curtain, and around every corner, for any sign of the culprit, or the missing items, or both, leaving no stone unturned. But ultimately I found nothing. That's when I remembered as the basement or lack thereof. The truth is, when we first bought the home, we were told that there had once been a basement, but at some point over the years, one of its previous owners had sealed it off, leaving no trace of a stairway downstairs. If I could just find such a stairway, or secret passage to the cellar, I just might be able to find the culprit, who I imagined would be sitting there, surrounded by a heaping pile of everything that had gone missing, including my wife. But no matter where I looked, I found nothing. Defeated, depressed, and terrified, all at the same time, I strongly considered moving to an entirely new house, but ultimately, I couldn't bring myself to leave the place that I'd called home for the past 8 years of marriage. Instead, my obsession with figuring out who, or what, had taken my wife, and to where consumed me and led me to drastic measures. And so, I started clearing out the house, selling off anything anyone would buy, and giving away anything left over, until my once cluttered home was reduced to an empty shell of its former self. When I finally got rid of the last item, I collapsed onto the rugless floor of the now barren living room and sat there in silence, exhausted from what I'd just done, but at the same time, satisfied with the fact that Hoover or whatever had been stealing my things had nothing left to steal. That is, until I started to doubt myself, questioning every decision that I had made, and thereby my very grasp on reality. I must have sat there in silence for 30 minutes, internally beating myself up about it, until I heard a rattling noise below me. Suddenly, in the middle of the empty living room, a trapdoor popped open. The very trapdoor to the basement that I had been previously looking for. Sitting on the floor, directly behind the now upright door, and out of the line of sight of whoever or whatever opened it, I suddenly saw a disfigured hand slowly reach out for something on the floor nearby. It was a pencil that I must have overlooked during the cleanse, the last object left to steal, before I heard it speak. "I'll be back for you tomorrow." Whatever it was called out from behind the trapdoor, and like that, it took the pencil. I then heard it climb back into the basement and saw the trapdoor shut behind it, as I still sat there on the floor, quietly cowering in fear. That was today, and tomorrow my only hope is that it doesn't take me too. This story is from Reddit user SG Woodhouse. Have you heard of this app called Are You Being Followed? I've always been afraid of being attacked on the street at night. Despite years of working in a bar and coming home late around midnight, this fear had never left me. The pay was lousy and the boss forbade employees to park their cars in the parking lot reserved for customers. So every night, I had to walk alone for several minutes to my car parked a little further away. One day, as I was talking to one of my friends, she told me about this application. Don't you know this app? It's called Are You Being Followed? Or AYBF for short. Basically, the app detects the waves of nearby cell phones, and if the algorithm notices that a signal is following you, the app sends you a notification, she explained. Some say it also detects ghosts and supernatural creatures that give off particular waves, but I think that's bullshit to attract views on TikTok, she added. I couldn't quite figure out how it worked, but she assured me that the algorithm was never wrong, and that it had already allowed her once to be alerted early enough to be safe from a strange guy one night. I downloaded it, figuring it couldn't hurt. One evening, as I was walking down the street clutching my coat, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. It was the app that had sent me a notification, and on the screen simply appeared the message, "You are being followed." I slowed down and looked around. The street was deserted, only the wind sounding in my ears. Perplexed, I continued walking, the sound of my solitary footsteps echoing around me. A minute later, I received another notification. "You are being followed." With no one behind me, I wondered if it was a bug, or if this app was literally a scam. "Boo!" I jumped and shouted. And right in front of me was my colleague Ian, wallowing in laughter. Sorry, I couldn't help it. Here, you forgot your tips," and he handed me a few bills. "Next time you do that, I'll empty my pepper spray in your face." Safe in my car, I finally managed to laugh it off, and figured that at least I had proof that the app worked. The app never triggered again after that, until tonight. I'd just finished a long evening and was exhausted. All I wanted to do was go home and go to bed. As I was walking alone in the cold night with just enough strength to look at the tips of my feet without falling asleep while walking, my cell phone vibrated and I picked it up, thinking someone had sent me a text message. "You are being followed." With no one behind me, I wondered if it was a bug or if this app was literally a scam. "Boo!" I jumped and shouted. And right in front of me was my colleague Ian, wallowing in laughter. Sorry, I couldn't help it. "Here, you forgot your tips," and he handed me a few bills. "Next time you do that, I'll empty my pepper spray in your face." Safe in my car, I finally managed to laugh it off, and figured that at least I had proof that the app worked. The app never triggered again after that, until tonight. I'd just finished a long evening and was exhausted. All I wanted to do was go home and go to bed. As I was walking alone in the cold night, with just enough strength to look at the tips of my feet without falling asleep while walking, my cell phone vibrated, and I picked it up thinking someone had sent me a text message. "You are being followed." The appearance of the message caught me off guard and woke me up all at once. I looked around. There was nothing and no one around at this late hour, and the temperature was negative. I thought back to the only time it had gone off, and Ian's joke. He knew perfectly well by now that I didn't find it funny, and I had made it clear that I hoped he wouldn't do it again or he would get his ass kicked. I stood there, looking back, looking for someone who obviously didn't exist. Still suspicious, I resumed my walk, keeping my phone in my hand. After a minute, it vibrated again. "You are being followed." I looked around again, but there was nothing. I was starting to panic. I was alone, in the middle of the night, and I was beginning to think something was wrong. A paper cup was pushed by the wind and the noise startled me. "Is anyone there?" I felt compelled to say aloud. Obviously, no one answered. "If there's anyone, I'm warning you, I'm armed," I lied, trying to be as convincing as possible. When nothing happened, I started to turn around to resume my walk. And at the last moment, out of the corner of my eye, even as I turned my head, I swore I saw something moving in the shadows at the corner of an alley. It took me a while to process what I'd seen. At first I thought it had been a cat. No, cats don't have white eyes. I walked quickly. "You are being followed." Behind me there was absolute silence. You are being followed. Was it the sound of bare feet on the sidewalk I'd just heard? You are being followed. I clutched my pepper spray can as I took the last few steps to my car, while looking around like a madwoman, attacked by imaginary birds. I closed the car door and locked the doors. Finally, I managed to exhale the air I'd been holding in my lungs. I didn't wait any longer, not wanting to linger here, and started the engine. Once home, I took a shower and got ready for bed. It had been a strange night. The more I thought about it, the more I wondered why the application had triggered so many times. Wasn't it possible that there had been a malfunction and I'd just imagined what I thought I was hearing and seeing because of the stress? After a while, I came to the conclusion that the app was bugged and that my overactive imagination combined with my natural fear of being attacked had done the rest. I put my mobile in my pocket and made several trips to the kitchen to throw away the remains of my dinner. My cell phone vibrated. You are being followed. My breathing stopped. I stood there for several seconds, staring at my screen. I raised my head slowly and looked around. I inspected every nook and cranny accessible to my view without making a move. The light in my bedroom was still off. Apart from that, I couldn't see any place where an intruder might be. I made my way discreetly towards my bedroom. Stop stressing. You said it yourself. This app doesn't work. I continued walking slowly and put my hand on the light switch just to the left of the door. I pressed it. I took a few steps inside, but without a doubt, no intruder, ghost or monster, had entered my room. As I returned to the living room, reassured, my gaze was drawn to the window and the night outside, and there I saw the pale face of a creature glued to the glass, staring back at me with the two whitest eyes I'd ever seen in my life. After a second spent trying to understand what I was seeing, I screamed in fear. The police immediately dispatched a patrol car after my panicked call. The two officers inspected the area around the house without finding anyone who resembled the vague description I'd given them, even though they seemed worried. I had obviously avoided mentioning the fact that what I had seen had white eyes and skin and a bald head. After a while, they had to leave and told me to call back if I ever saw someone at my window again. I closed all my shutters and spent the night awake, a knife resting on the living room table. When day broke, I finally got the courage to leave my house. I looked around it and saw something the police hadn't seen or hadn't wanted to tell me. Just below the window where I'd seen this thing, there were dozens and dozens of bare footprints going from left to right, towards all the other windows. This story is from Reddit user Blair Daniels. I saw a disturbing YouTube ad. Has anyone else seen it? After work, I do the exact same thing every day. I crack open a cold can of Diet Dr. Pepper, put my feet up, and watch an hour or two of funny videos on YouTube. I always plan to do something productive, cook a healthy dinner, go for a run, make progress on my paintings, but I never do. I'm always too exhausted from work to do anything else. I don't think humans were built to work 8 hours a day, sitting in the same room at the same desk, in front of the same computer. I think we're just forced to accept this as the norm because greedy CEOs have made it the norm. But I digress. All you need to know is that tonight was no different than any other night. I popped the can open, put my feet up, open in my laptop, click it on a funny YouTube video about the ridiculousness of Twilight. But then I froze. I'd expected an ad to pop up. Instead, there was a message over where the video should play, bold white letters over black. Your video will start shortly. Would you like to view a 15-second ad or remove 15 seconds from your life? I squinted at the screen. What? I'd never seen anything like this. I looked down at where the progress bar would be, thinking it was actually an ad itself. But there wasn't any bar, and there wasn't a skip button either. What is this? After staring at it for a minute, I decided it must be some new thing YouTube was rolling out. Like when, instead of an ad, they show you some sort of poll. Is this ad relevant to you? Have you ever bought anything from these companies? Help our sponsor by answering the following question. My mouse hovered over the two buttons. 15-second ad. Remove 15 seconds of life. Out of curiosity, I clicked the latter. The video started playing. Immediately, no ad. Well, that's cool. When the video was over, I popped some leftovers in the microwave and started another video. Again, instead of an ad, I got the same prompt. Your video will start shortly. Would you like to view a 30-second ad or remove 30 seconds from your life? I let out a little laugh and clicked on Remove 30 seconds of life. The video started to play, but only a few seconds into the video, I heard the microwave beep. Already? I put it on for 1 minute. There's no way it's already done. Confused, I paused the video and walked into the kitchen. The microwave had stopped its cycle. I pulled out the food and it was warm. But it was only in there for like 10 seconds. A sense of unease settled in my stomach. I picked up my bowl of mushy chicken Alfredo and walked back to the computer. Then I clicked on another video. Your video will start shortly. Would you like to view a 30-second ad or remove 30 seconds from your life? My cursor hovered over the remove button. But something stopped me. Something felt off. The food. It was almost like I shook my head. There was no way. It was almost like I skipped ahead in time. That's impossible, I muttered to myself. But then I had an idea. I pulled out my phone, put it on the counter, and pulled up the stopwatch. I hit the stopwatch. Then I immediately clicked Remove 30 seconds of life. The video started immediately. But when I looked down at the stopwatch, my heart dropped. It read 32 seconds. No. There was no way. 30 seconds had gone by. I just clicked the button a few seconds ago. What the fuck? My heart pounded in my ears. I glanced around the room, then I tried it again. My finger shook as I lowered it onto the phone screen. Tap. Click. The stopwatch read 32 seconds. But it didn't feel like 30 seconds. It felt like 2 seconds. Anxiety slipped into me like lead, weighing me down. My legs felt weak. I picked up the phone and texted my friend Chris. Can you come over? Or can I come over to your place? I need to talk to someone. I waited for a few minutes. He didn't reply. It was late. Almost 10. I set the phone down and stared at the paused video, my heart pounding. And then I had another idea. I set my phone down on a shelf across from me, propped it up against some books, pressed the record button. Then I walked back over to my desk, sat down, and clicked on another YouTube video. Your video will start shortly. Would you like to view a 60-second ad or remove 60 seconds from your life? 60 seconds now. I sucked in a deep breath, glanced up at the phone, the black eye of the camera looking down at me. My cursor hovered over the remove button. I clicked. The video immediately began to play. I got up and walked over to the phone, picked it up and stopped the recording. The length of the video was 1 minute, 17 seconds. What the fuck? I went over to the sink and splashed water on my face, checked the clock a few times, pinched myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming. Then I picked my phone back up. The recording was still there. All 1 minute, 17 seconds of it. This is so fucking weird. I sat back down. Then I opened the video and, with a deep breath, pressed play. I watched myself walk over to the seat in front of the computer. Then I sat down. I held my breath as my fingers went to the touchpad, clicking the remove button. Click. Video me stared at the computer screen, with incredible intensity, like I was watching the most riveting thing I'd ever seen in my life. My mouth hung slightly open, and my normally fidgety hands were still on the desk. I was just staring, with everything in me. At first, no audio came out of the computer speakers. I was expecting a loud jingle for an insurance company, or a chirpy female voice telling me about laundry detergent, but it was just silence. Until 10 seconds in, I heard a high-pitched whine. It sounded like the noise old TVs make when you leave them on, or ringing in your ears. a mechanical tone so high-pitched it's almost out of the range of human hearing. And when the tone sounded, Video Me's hands flew to the keyboard, and they began feverishly typing. I stood there, frozen, watching the video, watching my fingers race across the keyboard, my eyes staring at the screen with absolute concentration, my mouth still hanging open. I thought I could see a silvery strand of drool falling from my lips, onto the desk. What the actual fuck? I briefly glanced away from the phone to my desk and noticed a small puddle of liquid shining in the low light. What was I typing? Was the ad, or whatever YouTube was showing me, was it making me do this? Because I looked dazed, hypnotized, controlled. As the video approached its end, I saw Video Me snap out of it. I closed my mouth. My hands started to fidget. I got out of the seat and walked towards the phone on the shelf. And that was it. I stood there, frozen, the silence ringing in my ears. This is crazy. Absolutely insane. It was conspiracy-level stuff. YouTube is mind-controlling people through ads that erase time. Quick, block YouTube on every device that you own. If I had been on anything, hell, if I'd even had a glass of wine, I would have blamed it on that in an instant. But I was stone cold sober. I walked back over to the computer and put my hand on the screen, about to close it. But then I paused. I couldn't see the computer screen in the video. It was the wrong angle. But if I put the phone behind me, I could see what I was typing. No. You're not doing that again. My inner voice instantly protested. Close the laptop and get out of here. But I couldn't. Curiosity was tugging at me. I had to know what I was doing. I quickly propped the phone up behind me and sat back down at the computer. I clicked on another video. Your video will start shortly. Would you like to view a 60-second ad or remove 60 seconds from your life? I took a deep, shuddering breath. Then I clicked remove. The video instantly began to play, but I knew that was just from my point of view. I grabbed my phone from behind me and sure enough, the recording time read 1 minute 6 seconds. I swallowed. And then I hit play. What I saw was so ridiculous that I should have laughed. It should have been the funniest thing I saw all week, but instead I stared at the screen, my heart plummeting further and further. Where the ad had been, there was instead a text box. In it, I was typing the same 6 words, over and over. I want to buy Sparkle detergent. I want to buy Sparkle detergent. I want to buy Sparkle. I must have written it 50 times before the minute was up. Then the text box disappeared, and the video started to play. I watched Video Me get up, turn around, and turn off the recording. I slammed the laptop shut and went straight to bed, my heart racing in my chest. When I couldn't sleep, pulled out my phone and began searching for this phenomenon. Typing keywords into Google like, weird YouTube ad, YouTube remove 30 seconds from life, etc. Nothing came up. But it doesn't end there. Because I could have sworn it was around 2:30 a.m. when I started searching. And I could have sworn I spent no more than a half hour Googling. But when I checked the time after closing out of all my tabs, it was nearly 4 a.m. I think I lost an entire hour. And I have no way of finding out what happened, what I was typing, or watching, or being brainwashed to buy, in that hour.